Is there any possible way that the Dallas Cowboys could trade up for running back Bijan Robinson in the 2023 NFL Draft? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your
Locked
daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on
Cowboys.
Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, we are answering Twitter questions today. How you doing, sir?
I'm always doing great when we're answering Twitter questions. I love hearing what everyone thinks. I love hearing people's ideas about the draft and questions. It really kind of helps, get the wheels greased and thinking about new things. So let's pop right into it.
Yeah, we've got actually several questions about Bijan Robinson, whether the Cowboys should pick him at 26, whether the Cowboys should consider a slight trade up. Landon, we have heard, I don't even want to say rumblings because I don't know if that's the case. I think we've heard some prominent draft members wonder if the Cowboys could trade up for Bijan Robinson. Do you think that is realistic at all?
No, I mean, not. I mean, I think a trade up to get Bijan Robinson is kind of without any specifics. Is it possible? Sure. Like, could it be that they trade up 2 or 3 spots to go get Bijan Robinson? That could happen. Do I think that they're going to go trade up to, the teens or not 9 to go up to get him? No, I don't think that that's something.
Well, and I've seen so many people say, oh, Jerry Jones loves to make splashes. He's going to go up and make a big move like this. When's the last time the Cowboys have made a splash like this?
Like this? Yeah, it's been a while.
Do you know the last time they traded up in the first 3 rounds?
I'm trying to think. Was it for Dez maybe? Or no,
DeMarcus Lawrence, 2014.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That's
into
the last time they've traded up for a player in the top 100 pick. So, like, as much as people want to say Jerry Jones is aggressive like this, like they just don't do that very often.
Yeah, so I tend to think that, this is something that is probably a game of telephone from Stephen Jones's interview on 105.3, where they threw that out there and Stephen didn't outright deny it. So then, of course, everyone speculates an outright denial is a confirmation and kind of discussed it. But do I think that Bijan Robinson is on the list for Cowboys to select if he's there at 26? Absolutely. I think he's on that list.
Agree. Yes.
Do I think that they covet Bijan Robinson? I think they do.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think that they're trading up to go get him? I wouldn't be shocked if it was a small trade up. I would be absolutely flabbergasted if it was more than 3 or 4 picks, to be honest.
So you mentioned the Dez trade, right? Like the Cowboys, I believe, went from 27 to 24 to grab Dez. If you are going to do any trade at all for, I think, anybody in this class, that's what you're looking at here. I cannot see the Cowboys going from like 27 to 17 for a player like Bijan because Stephen Jones, Will McClay value draft picks so much. They value building through the draft. Frankly, I don't see them doing that for really any player, especially not for a running back, even though the Cowboys might value running back more than any other team in the league.
Yeah, for all you cynical everydayers that are that think that the Cowboys are definitely going to trade up because they love running backs, just know that your cynical thoughts on how the Cowboys feel about draft picks is in direct conflict with this. So, I agree that the Cowboys are probably one of the teams that would draft a running back in the first round.
I agree.
But I don't necessarily agree that the Cowboys are willing to give up a bunch of picks or especially valuable picks to move up to go select him.
And I just want to be clear. If he is there at 26, I actually do expect the Cowboys to pick him if he was there at 26.
I have to think that if he is there at 26, I mean, it would be hard to fault the Cowboys because he likely is the top player on his board if he's there. On their board if he's there. Sorry.
Yeah, and I wonder how close it even would be, right? Like, would he? Let's say, throwing this out, let's say he's the 8th best player on their board. Do they even have somebody else who was in the top 15 or 16 left on the board. I kind of doubt it. So at that point, you are taking the best player available. I've got mixed feelings about it because drafting a running back at 4 and drafting a running back at 26 are completely different things.
Completely
However,
agree.
this team could still fill needs at other spots, and I think in maybe better ways. So I don't know. I mean, again, mixed
I'll throw
feelings.
this out. Like, here's my bottom line with this is that, and I think that this is the thing that we still need to quantify before we kind of have a unified theory about drafting running backs, right? Is what level of a money 5 player, like how many good seasons of a offensive tackle or a cornerback that you draft in the first round have to be equivalent value of 5 good years at running back? Because when you draft a running back in the first round, you're hopefully, I mean, you would hope that you're going to get at least 4 very, very quality, high, productive
I mean, you
seasons
almost
from that
have to,
running back.
right?
So where is that line of demarcation where 4 years of running back is less valuable than what, 2 seasons of an elite offensive tackle? So I think that's where I'm still at with this, is that if you're giving me a choice between drafting a running back who I feel 90% certain is going to be a productive player
Call a borderline
versus,
Pro Bowl player. Yep.
yes, versus drafting an unknown commodity that may need a year or 2 to develop, I think that that's a reasonable question to ask. That
I
is the
agree.
running back
Yes.
a better pick at that spot
When you are getting to 26, because even
when you
throw
get
out the names.
26?
Yeah, because think about the names that we're talking about. We're going to be talking more about Steve Avila, working on the last
Is it
name.
Avila?
Oh,
I don't
Avila. I
know.
don't know.
Goodness.
We like Steve Avila a lot. I was just
Yeah.
throwing him out for an example.
Yeah.
Probably best case scenario, you're getting an above average left guard. And I think that's very realistic, right?
Especially for right away, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
like there's some development there, but we're talking about what are you going to be getting on the first contract, and more specifically, year 1 and year 2, right?
I would prefer Avila, but I can at least understand the argument. Hey, it's a left guard, let's say an above average left guard versus a Pro Bowl running back. Those two are close enough, in my opinion, that we can at least have a conversation. Now, if you're talking about, okay, hey, it's our Nolan Smith, right? Let's say the Cowboys had a
Yeah.
needed edge rusher, whatever. And it's Nolan Smith versus Bijan Robinson. I think that's a little bit
That's a
different,
different
right?
thing.
But that's just
Sure.
a lot of context needed here when you're talking about running backs in round 1.
That's I think the big key there is that there is a lot of context that's required, and it's down to exactly who is on the board, right?
Yes.
Like, because I think that's all that matters a lot. And I think the other thing too that's tough here is that Bijan Robinson is, as far as worth it first round running back play, he's not Zeke, he's not some of these other guys we've seen, and on top of that, he's coming out in a year. I understand that every year has a lot of running backs, but this year really seems like it's very, very deep at running back. So
go listen to our podcast yesterday where we were talking about 3 running backs that could all be selected on day 3 that we like quite a bit.
Yeah. So I think that that's what makes that whole question of Bijan Robinson very difficult, because there's depth in the class, the position, the fact that he's so versatile and he can be used kind of as a hybrid halfback running back, wide receiver situation. Like, all those make this a very difficult kind of conversation. And honestly, I don't think it's clear cut whether you should be angry or mad, or angry or happy if the Cowboys drafted Bijan at 26.
Well, I'll just be angry just because it's the brand.
No,
right?
that's
it's
your
just a
brand.
default, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's get to some more Twitter questions next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Grand slams, no hitters, and double plays are back, and there is no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. We've got playoffs for the basketball going on. We've got baseball. We had NFL draft props that you can bet on. So don't miss your chance to get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Every dayers. Tomorrow on the show, we're going to be talking about our favorite sleepers in the 2023 NFL draft. So you guys are going to want to make sure that you tune in for that. But Landon, let's get to some more questions. This next one is from Christopher. If the Cowboys were to take a quarterback in this year's draft, they are. Who are your favorite prospects on day 2 and day 3?
Well, we talked about some of these guys before. I think coming out of the Senior Bowl, some of the guys that I felt like I was really interested in were I'm completely blanking on his name now. The Houston kid,
Clayton Tune.
Yep. Clayton Tune. Just talked about him, but already forgot.
Yep.
Clayton Tune is a guy I really liked. Coming out of the Senior Bowl, just watching what he did, went and watched a couple of his games, and felt like he is very much, that type of quarterback, very productive at the college football level, threw for a whole bunch of yards, just has a lot of experience. He just looks like a guy who maybe a little bit limited in his tool set. And I think that's probably why we're not talking about a guy who's, near the top of the draft, but I think he is smart. He has a little bit of athleticism to him. He can move around a little bit. And I think he can be accurate. I think his, arm strength is okay, but it's pretty limited. But as far as a guy that could come in, seems to be, someone who could pick up an offense really well, seems to be a really good fit for like a West Coast offense. I like him a lot. And I think
if you watch Tank Dell tape, right?
Yeah,
like you could, there's some really nice throws from Clayton Tune where the ball is just on the money. And I gotta say, I do really like these quarterbacks coming out of school to just have like a million passing attempts, right? Because it does seem like it's something that transfers, right? Like if you got a lot of experience throwing the ball, like look at Brock Purdy last year, right? You come right in and you can have success. I do like that a little bit. Gardner Minshew is the best example of this from the last couple of years. When he was at Washington State, comes right in and has success because he has so much experience throwing passes.
I think there's a reason. I mean, this is obviously 20 years since he's, wrote these, 30 years since he wrote these. But I think the reason that Parcells had those kind of commandments for the quarterbacks he was drafting, they were about years in college and experience. But I think ultimately what it came down to is you want somebody who has been under fire and throwing the football, because that experience is something that you cannot teach in a classroom. That's something that you have to learn on the field. So coming into the NFL with that sort of experience, I think, really helps your learning curve and kind of learning that whole situation quickly. I did want to throw out one more name as a guy that kind of we keep hearing whispers about, and as a guy that they could potentially be interested in. And that's Aiden O'Connell from Purdue. Is kind of a different sort of cat than Tune, right? He's a little bit more statuesque, more of a big arm thrower of the football. I think he has some actually nice accuracy.
Oh, I think his accuracy is awesome. Honestly, it's great.
And I think the issue here is that he's extremely like stiff and limited as an athlete. Like he's going to have some Carson Wentz aspects to him, because some of that Roethlisberger where you're just going to stick. He doesn't really have an option to stick in the pocket, right?
What's funny is you said Wentz. I actually saw a lot of Jared Goff in his game, right?
Okay.
Just kind of a tall, statuesque quarterback. But if you give him time, he can put the ball wherever you want.
And that's the sacrifice you get with those quarterbacks, right? With Wentz and with Roethlisberger and Goff too, as well, is that they will. It's being patient in the pocket almost to a fault, right?
Yep.
And there's pros and cons to it, right? If someone comes open, it's a big play. If someone doesn't come open, your quarterback is likely to take a gigantic hit. So, and I think for O'Connell, it's more about just not having the physical ability to kind of escape or move around in the pocket too well. So he doesn't really have much of a choice.
I'll give you one more name before we move on. Jake Haener from Fresno State. I kind of thought he was the best quarterback at the Senior Bowl this year. I know that's not a high bar to pass, but he was the MVP of the Senior Bowl. See a little bit of Case Keenum in his game, like somebody who is really accurate in the short to intermediate stuff, but also has a little bit of athleticism to play make. I think that's somebody you draft 4th, 5th round, and you just wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. I like both of those. Him and Tune, I think, are very similar. Probably going to be drafted similarly. Rounds. There's a couple of different guys in this class that, after you fall past the Levises and definitely after the Richardsons and all that, that you wait a little while and you get into some of these, like Stetson Bennett, I think will be a guy a little even further down the road that could be eligible. So there's lots of guys there that if you're interested in developing someone that may have one or two holes that you really could have some upside if you are patient with them.
All right, next question. This one from NFL Geyer. He wants to know, where are you drafting Andrew Voris, the tackle guard from USC who tore his ACL during the NFL scouting combine, likely to miss this entire year? Does feel like a Cowboys special in so many different ways, doesn't it?
I really liked Andrew Voorhees just simply because I feel like in my head canon, he's Jason Voorhees' brother from the Friday the 13th movies.
There you go.
And because he's just a murderer on the field.
Yep.
Unfortunately, somebody chopped his ACL during
Yeah.
the combine. So he's not going to play this year. And so for me, I kind of had Voorhees in and you tell me what you think. I mean, I had him as a day 2 guy, I think.
I had him as a
Late
third
day
round
2.
pick. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yep.
I think now, I'd take him 5th or 6th round. I mean,
I
'cause
think fifth round's probably the sweet spot, right?
I think because you're getting a guy who you feel like could recover from the ACL. Maybe he still needs another redshirt year after that. I don't know, but I think
Or
that
a
he's
year to get up to the speed, right?
yeah, exactly. Or like that combination of both, right? And I
Yep.
think then by his 3rd season, he could be competing for a starting position depending on what you have. So yeah, I think 5th round is probably right where I'd pull the trigger if you really wanted to make sure you were targeting him. And I think it's worth it because you don't get that many opportunities to draft a guy who you feel like talent-wise could develop into a starter in the 5th round unless they're dealing with an injury, unless they're dealing with an off-field issue, unless they're dealing with, whatever situation that drove them down there in the first place.
So let's just kind of play this out. Assuming, let's say the Cowboys draft him in the end of the 4th round or the 5th round. He tore his ACL in the beginning of March. So typically these guys can start to practice, 9 to 10 months after an ACL. So you're talking about maybe getting onto the practice field at the start of the new year, maybe. But
Yeah.
more likely, you're hoping that he can compete for a swing job in 2024.
Yeah.
And then by 2025, he's starting for you. If you can find a starting offensive lineman in the 5th round and you're just
Yeah.
willing to be a little bit patient, it's worth it.
Yeah, if you can get him on the field and working out again by the end of the regular season, not with the hope of him playing this year, but just that that's the course of his recovery, and then he can have like somewhat close to a clean or regular off season for his first off season in the NFL. I think you're hitting a good target because then you're still getting all the benefits that you get, except for the play time benefit that we've discussed with guys like Damone Clark and some of these rookies who have gotten early playing time that are able to translate that into their film study, into really helping increase them. You don't get that with him, but you do get all the other stuff, right? That the time in the weight room and all the time with the team, all the times in the meetings. If you're able to kind of get him healthy and get him into that, then you should be able to reap some benefit by next year, and then definitely something by year 3.
He is certainly somebody that's on my radar as a day 3 option for the Cowboys because they literally do this every single year, right? They're going to draft a guy that's
Jabril
hurt.
Cox.
Or a project guy like Matt Waletzko, and you're going to stash you for a year. And let's just see what happens because it's a day 3 pick. The upside is so great, especially when you're drafting somebody from a big school like Dallas did from LSU or Voris from USC. So I think this one does make a lot of sense. Landon, let's get to some more Twitter questions next. All right, we are back here with a question from Goran. He wants to know, who is the Trayvon Diggs of this year's draft? And what he means by that is a guy who the Cowboys might want at 26, who has a chance to potentially be there at 58. You might remember back in the 2020 draft, Cowboys kind of seemed like they were going to pick Trayvon Diggs at 17. CeeDee Lamb ultimately fell, and then Diggs fell to them later in the 2nd round. Who's that guy for you?
Well, it's one of 2 guys, depending on how you say his name. It's either Steve Avila or Steve Avila.
The TCU guard.
TCU guard, either way. I think that to me seems like the guy that a lot of us would be, if we had to pick him at 26, I think it's
okay
a reach, but I think it's a safe floor. If he showed up at 58, we're partying, man. I mean, like that's what I said. I was actually a guest on another show last night, and someone mentioned that and actually we did a mock draft, and in that mock draft, Avila fell to 58, and I told him if that happened in the real draft, it would, without a doubt, no matter who the pick was at 26, it would be my favorite pick. It's a home run pick. So I think he's the guy that likely will, that we would be okay, or at least I would be okay with at the end of the first round, who I think could potentially make it to 58. Though I mean, honestly, that area from like 42 through 58, like I would be holding my breath the entire time, honestly.
I've got two guys for you. The first is very unrealistic. To me, it's Darnell Washington, right? I could see a case where the Cowboys think about him at 26, but they feel like, you know what, the receiving upside's just not there. He's still a long ways to go. Let's just pass on tight end and see who's available. I don't see him
Oh, wait.
falling to
Are we saying
58.
Darnell Washington?
Sorry,
'Cause you
Darnell
said Darnell.
Washington. That's not
Okay,
right.
yeah. Okay, yeah.
Darnell
You said
Washington.
Darnell, right.
Darnell
Yeah, gotcha.
Washington. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's one. The other one for
Yeah.
me is Mozzie Smith, the Michigan
Yeah.
defensive tackle.
That's a good name there.
We
honestly.
thought about him earlier as a potential option. I still think he could be, but would it shock you if he fell to like late 40s, early 50s? Because it wouldn't for me.
No, I mean, despite the fact that he's, DT2, we almost don't even talk about Jalen Carter at this point, you know. I think that if a team doesn't specifically need that type of nose tackle, there's going to be a lot, even though he's really talented, I think there's going to be a lot of teams that will potentially pass on him because they feel like they got to get their wide receiver during a run or, something like that. I think that would be a mistake. I think that if you need a defensive tackle, you better draft him early because you're certainly not going to get the opportunity late. But
and the thing with Mozzie too is maybe you just see a bunch of these other defensive tackles go ahead of him, like Brian Brzee from Clemson and Kalijah Cansey, right? Or maybe Tommy from Northwestern. Maybe all those guys go ahead of him because they're just better athletes with more pass rush potential.
Yeah,
and you see like Mozzie fall and be the 5th defensive tackle drafted in this class.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really where you see a lot of discrepancy, right? Where you're going to see a lot of what specifically the teams are looking for in their, for their type of defensive tackle, right? So it certainly is possible. And again, since Mozzie is the one guy whose outstanding trait is more run game based as opposed to pass game based. There is the chance that some of these other defensive tackles get drafted above him, and that he ends up getting pushed and he falls right into the Cowboys' lap. That would be pretty incredible.
One more question from Goran before we head out. What is a position where the Cowboys don't pick someone early, you can easily see them just waiting until training camp or after training camp to add a veteran?
Well, I don't know that they would completely avoid it, but I think that if they don't get a offensive guard, like specifically a guard, early, then I still think they'll probably draft an offensive lineman, but I don't think they would draft a guard specifically later. I think they would draft a offensive
because they don't need depth.
Play guard. Right? Yeah. Well, yeah, or exactly, right? Like I think what they need is a starting left guard. Right. Or otherwise they're going to have to not really cobble together because I still really like the starting five if Tyler Smith is your guard. But I think otherwise they're going to have to shift things around. So if they don't get specifically a starting guard early, then I don't know I doubt they would draft a guard only past 90.
Yeah. I don't
right.
see that.
I think they would if they draft an offensive lineman, it would be a swing interior player or a swing tackle guard type, not specifically a guy that they would be coming into just play guard.
100% agree. I'll also throw in linebacker, right? Like they'll probably draft a linebacker at some point, but if they draft one on like day 3, it's probably a guy that could help on special teams. But if they don't draft one with one of their first 4 picks, that is a spot where I could see them being like, you know what, Anthony Barr, come back and play 600 snaps for us. Or Deion Jones, you're a free agent. Come in and compete with these guys. Or Miles Jack or whoever. It does feel like a position they could wait until mid-August to grab a guy if they felt like, you know, we don't love our depth behind Damone Clark and Leighton Vander Esch.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if that's the case, I see them drafting a Devin Harper type, right?
Yes,
like a D Winters from TCU.
Yep.
We know that the special teams coach went out and had a visit with the TCU team. I'm sure they were looking at kickers, but I also think he was working out D Winters just because another guy who's a linebacker by name, but he's like 5'11", 225, and he runs sub 4.5. So those are the kind of athletes that you're looking for as special teamers.
Exactly.
Much like they did last year.
All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen. Again, tomorrow we will be back talking about our favorite sleepers in the 2023 NFL Draft. You're not going to want to miss that show. Go check it out. Check us out on YouTube, Locked On Cowboys over there. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosier, and we'll see you guys next time.